So my first question for you is going to be, how are students using AI, and what are the common reasons they would use the AI platform?
Well, everyone, not just students, is using AI very frequently.
Yeah.
So if you use Google, if you use a smartphone, if you use GPS, you are interacting with AI, whether you realize it or not.
Yeah.
Now, more specifically, students are using AI at a very high rate. A recent study in Inside Higher Ed from last year actually reported that 85% of students had used AI for some class assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And in the meantime, that number has probably increased
sure.
given the proliferation of AI and also its integration into other platforms that students regularly use.
Yeah.
What we're seeing now is that students are using AI for other purposes outside of the classroom, for day-to-day activities, and that can be everything from dating advice, workout tips, and more there is a trend towards students using AI to get advice about mental health concerns.
Mm-hmm. So when using an AI platform, where's the information coming from?
Well, large language models like Google's Gemini, OpenAI, Anthropic's Claude are trained on massive volumes of textual data.
Mm-hmm.
And those data include billions and maybe even trillions of parameters. And those parameters give greater or less weight to different aspects of the data. What that means is that these large language models are very effective at predicting human language and also mimicking the semantics, syntax, and ontologies of language. So they become very convincing conversation partners. Now, the problem with that is that they also take on the biases and the mistakes that are present in the data on which they were trained. Even the most sophisticated models, and we know if you've followed AI, they're getting more and more sophisticated. These tools continue to have errors, and they can also present just nonsensical responses, what would typically be called hallucinations.
Hi, my name's Pete DeMaria. I'm the lead psychiatrist at Tuttleman Counseling Services, and I'm happy to be here to share a little bit about Tuttleman with you all. Tuttleman is the student counseling center at Temple, and we offer a wide range of services. And the way students connect with us is that they go to our website and they register, and then one of our staff members gives you a call and then sets them up for what we call an initial consultation. It's a phone call with one of our therapists. And in that conversation, we try and find out what issues are going on, what the student is looking for, and how we can be of help. And in that process of that interaction, we're able to determine whether or not there's some things that we offer at Tuttleman, whether there might be other services available at Temple in general, or maybe even in the Philadelphia community at greater. And so that conversation then starts the path to trying to figure out what's going on. Tuttleman's got a lot of services. We're really very lucky that we have at a large university, we have a large counseling center, which means we have staff, a fairly large staff. Many of our staff members do have kind of specialties or areas of expertise. So whether there's concerns about, say, sexual assault or interpersonal violence or childhood trauma, we have people that work on that. Whether there's concerns a student has in their relationship with substances, whether it's alcohol, marijuana, or other substances, or maybe certain behaviors, the internet, video games, gaming, things like that, gambling, we have people who focus on that. But in addition to individual counseling, we have a very robust group program. And our group program has both traditional, what people would normally think of as psychotherapy groups. We also have a number of skill-based classes and activities that don't really fit the usual group. Some students say, I don't want to go to a group where I'm kind of telling my life story to these people I don't know. But we offer things like an anxiety class or an unstuck class or executive function class where we try to pull out things that are important, tools that students can use to help themselves, whether they're dealing with things like anxiety, depression, executive function, things like many people would identify as ADHD type things. And these are all meant to help students gain skills to be successful in a timely way and one that is very student friendly.
If I'm asking AI like generated questions about my mental, personal health, like all that good stuff, is there anything I should like be concerned about?
Yeah, there's a few things to consider. I think one of the most important things is privacy. When you work with a counselor or a mental health professional, the first thing you do is sign an informed consent document.
Yeah.
So there's no such agreement with an AI chatbot. You don't really know what's going to happen with the data that you input or the information that you input into an AI chatbot. There's no clear, the terms of use are prone to change, they're subject to change. Similarly, these tools don't have any legal protection for users in the way that mental health services do. So your private conversations with a counselor are legally protected. That's not the case with an AI tool.
And then the other piece is confidentiality. That is something that, at least at Tuttleman, we take very seriously. So when students come in, like when I meet with students, one of the first things I do is go over that so people feel safe. Because if you're going to share personal information, you kind of need to know that what I'm sharing here is going to stay here. And we're very hyper about confidentiality. I usually say to students, what we talk about here stays here. I said, if someone comes in and asks about you, I say, I'm not sure who you're talking about. Don't even acknowledge that we have met. That way, students are provided that security of confidentiality. Now, of course, there's always the proviso that if there's concerns about safety, that there are certain things there where we have to, by law, make sure that people are safe. But in general, what people talk about is held confidential, which I don't think AI offers.
So typically, AI chatbots tend to be sycophantic. So they tend to say, that's a great idea, I agree. That can be good, and it can also be very bad. A counselor, on the other hand, when appropriate, may challenge clients when they have a cognitive distortion, when they are experiencing distress. They may present their client with alternative ways of thinking about a problem. A chatbot may and is much more likely to only reinforce that negative thinking or those cognitive distortions. Lastly, I would say an important consideration is the unreliability and unpredictability of generative AI. There are some high-profile cases where AI has just kind of gone off the rails and encouraged users to act on harmful fantasies or delusional behaviors. And clearly that is a serious problem, and it's something that really hasn't been resolved even as AI becomes more sophisticated and more refined.
When you meet with a person, they're going to be able in a very real-time way to talk to a student, find out what's going on, what's affecting them. And I think when you're talking with a trained professional, they may well pick up on small things that are signs that are important that may indicate perhaps more serious issues. Like some concerns that I have about AI are if a student is really feeling very bad and they're having thoughts of harming themselves, or they're having thoughts that they have trouble controlling their impulses, their emotions. I'm not sure that AI is going to have the ability to intervene or do that in a real-time way to offer the support necessary, or if really necessary, get them to a place where they can get the services that they need. I mean, we've heard stories of people interacting with AI around suicide that have not always turned out real well. And when you're with a trained professional who can then work with a student and figure out, okay, how do we help promote, make sure the student is safe and gets the type of care they need, or if by chance they're having like an adverse reaction to maybe a substance they used, or they're having maybe a very difficult emotional state like a psychotic state. I'm not sure how good AI is at picking that up and being able to manage that and to get the student where they need to be. So it's kind of like the idea of safeguards. I don't know that AI has built in yet the safeguards it needs to do that.
So my next question for you is, what are some of the emotional and cognitive pitfalls of over-reliance on AI?
Well, I think it's definitely too early to know the full implications of this technology, but one of the things we know for sure is that an important part of learning is making mistakes. A lot of educational theorists would say that when you make an error, it results in a kind of cognitive restructuring that doesn't occur when you're 100% right all the time. So when you rely on a chatbot for this kind of cognitive outsourcing, you kind of do yourself a disservice when it comes to becoming a better learner, the opportunity to become a better learner through making mistakes, through trial and error, through things like that. The same is true in the realm of social and emotional learning. So if you rely on AI for kind of the interpersonal equivalent of a vibe check, or you interact with AI in a way that you would normally interact with a real person, you kind of forego the opportunity to develop emotionally and socially.
The way I look at it is think about generative AI as two-dimensional and think about meeting with a mental health professional as three-dimensional. And so, while you see pretty much similar things, two-dimensional isn't three-dimensional. One of the great concerns I have about AI is that it's going to give back to you kind of what you give it, and a lot of times it's really built to give positive feedback. And so you may not see some of the nuances that a person can pick up on when you meet with them, as an individual, like a mental health professional. The other thing I would point out, in particular here at Temple with our staff, is we are focused on working with Temple University students. So when students come into us, we know students because that's who we work with. We know Temple because that's where we work. We know North Philadelphia and Philadelphia in general, such that you're meeting with someone that has a lot of background and experience in understanding the issues that students come in with. The generative AI certainly can draw on resources and try and pull that together, but it's hard for me to believe that in meeting with AI that you're going to really get that same experience. And I think that some of the more critical and nuanced things that you really do want to be thinking about, you may not get through AI. And so it's gonna leave you feeling a bit anemic.
So I have two questions and one for you. The first one is, how can students interact with AI ethically, and what's the most important thing for them to know when they're using these platforms?
Sure. I think in the context of the classroom, the most important thing to think about is what are your instructor's guidelines for using AI. So any course syllabus should have a statement about what the rules are, what the guidelines are for using AI. In some cases, it may be okay to use AI to get background information on a topic. You may be able to use AI to come up with topic ideas for your own research paper or for a project. It may even be okay to use AI to synthesize existing theories and see the intersection of different ideas. But I think the big takeaway for classroom use or for academic use is to know what your instructor's expectations are. Outside of the classroom, I think this is where personal values really come into play.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the things to think about with regard to AI in your own personal life are, how does AI impact your sense of curiosity? How does it affect your sense of authenticity? And how does it relate to how you interact with other people?
So my next question for you is, where can students learn more about AI and stay up to date on all the new developments?
Well, if I can plug Temple Libraries for a moment,
Yeah.
I would encourage people to take a look at a guide that we in the libraries have created that is entirely focused on AI chatbots. And we can include a link to that guide
Down below.
in this video. And I think that will really help people understand what AI chatbots are in terms of large language models, what that technology means, what it looks like, and then also what are things that chatbots do well, and what are some of their limitations, and what are some of the things that users should be aware of and be concerned about. In addition to that, most major US news sources are reporting on AI a lot, and that can get sort of tiresome, but I think it is important to kind of keep current, and that's one of the ways that you can do that. Many of these sources, like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, also have interesting podcasts and interviews with experts about AI. And that's often a good place to get kind of a quick update on information related to this technology. The last thing that I would say is that, as we know, AI is impacting all different aspects of life. And there are experts in different subject areas who report on and investigate the impacts of AI on their own discipline. So if you are in the health sciences, if you are in the arts and humanities, if you're in the College of Science and Technology, you may be interested in knowing how AI is specifically affecting your major or your area of interest. And I think that seeking out experts in those areas who research AI can also be a helpful way to stay current.
So I have one final question for you today, and it's, how can I interact with AI in a mindful way?
Okay, well, I think one of the things that's really important is understanding what AI is, understanding how large language models operate, what they are and what they're not as well. What exactly the mechanisms are behind these tools, I think, can really help you understand how it's behaving and can keep you grounded as far as your communication, the chats that you have with an AI tool. You can still understand and think more critically about the mechanisms behind the large language model. The second thing I would say is to be, as I've already mentioned, very cautious about sharing personal information with an AI chatbot, because that information is not protected in any kind of clearly stated or transparent way. I think with any technology, not just AI, I think it's important to take mindful breaks, to step away from those technologies. And if you think about any way that we use technology, whether it's social media, whether it's online shopping or doom scrolling through news feeds, it's important to balance those activities with activities that take place offline. And the final thing that I'll say is to think about how AI and how technology impacts you personally, and how it informs the way that you show up offline outside of the platform.
For sure. Thank you so much.